What's up, everybody? Dev Del Molino here, the synthesizer of opinions, back with another review today. And today we are taking a look at the newest, latest, greatest question mark Vince Staples' album, The Big Fish Theory. Vince Staples is a rapper that hails from Long Beach, California. You know the LBC, Snoop Dogg, Nate Dogg, Warren G. Vince has been around for a pretty good chunk of time now and has established himself as a pretty solid and respectable artist in the hip-hop community. He is a competent lyricist, he is a thoughtful musician, and over the course of his career so far, he's put together a body of work that is pretty widely well received amongst music listeners with his early mixtapes, the Hell Can Wait EP, Summertime '06 album, Prima Donna EP, and now The Big Fish Theory. Once again, with not much of a surprise to myself or other Vince Staples fans, he's continuing to push the envelope of his sound and the general sound of hip-hop music on this album, and is taking some risky detours along the course of the track listing as well. So again, the more experimental side of Vince Staples' music is definitely fleshed out on this album, definitely takes this album into some different places, but if you're paying attention, one of the best things I think about this record is the way that Vince Staples contextualizes or at least positions some of the more challenging and out of left field tracks in between songs with some more face value. Because one of the worst things that can happen to an album that is going the more experimental route is when the artist goes too far down that rabbit hole for too long. It alienates the listener and it disincentivizes listening to the album in its entirety. Especially with the more casual listeners, because they're gonna pick out what was hot, they're gonna pick out what they like, but if these albums drag on too long, they're going to throw the rest away. Again, I like that this album takes those risks, it definitely goes there from time to time, but does not forget to rein us back in with songs like 745 and Big Fish and Yeah Right, etc., etc. This gave me a reason to want to return back to the album again and again and again, which I did, and listen to this thing front to back. Songs like Crabs in a Bucket, Love Can Be, Party People, all the interludes didn't really connect with me in my first go around with this album, but they don't impede the progress of the record too much to the point where I felt like returning to this album in its intended context would give me some more appreciation for some of the songs that didn't really stick the landing in my first run through this album. So I do go back and I re-listen to these songs and the album a good handful of times, but I never really got past a certain level of appreciation for these songs, and so my enjoyment of these tracks and thus the album is kind of limited. I can see the creativity and some of the thought that was put into these more extraneous tracks. I can even admit some impressive or interesting moments on these songs, some better than others. But as a whole, these more experimental tracks are just not well executed enough for my liking. So for instance, with a song like Love Can Be, this track is just okay to me in my opinion, but then on the second half of this record, Vince kind of plugs in these guest vocals that I find to be just terrible. And it really does ruin the song and turns it into an overall pretty skippable track. Now, my biggest criticism over anything else are the interludes. Vince doesn't really provide the listeners with any reason that these interludes would impact the record, so they just don't impact the record in any meaningful way. He is going for a change of pace that I don't think he's ever really been good at, which is making more moody interludes or tracks. But if you've listened to any of his previous projects, you would know that he sort of goes for that moodier tone at least a couple times on every project, and it never really pans out. However, I don't hate anything on this album. I just think what would take this record from being good to great is going there, going for it, being experimental, but executing to a T even when you're out there. I think what makes To Pimp a Butterfly a great album and a classic is that it goes so far beyond what other people in hip-hop have even tried to do, and it executes perfectly every single song.
Speaking of Kendrick.
Okay, story time. I'm gonna be 100% with you. I'm literally sitting on the toilet listening to this album for the first time. Yeah Right comes on, and I hear this instrumental, and I'm like, oh my god. And I'm bumping with it, and then all of a sudden, Kendrick comes out of nowhere on this thing, right? And I'm like, oh my fucking god. Like, actually earth-shattering experience. Like, it literally broke me. So, yeah, songs like that and, other highlights on this album I think are big highlights. And I really do think they raise the value of this album a lot. I think Big Fish is another really great record on here. I like the big, bouncy instrumental, of course. I like the Juicy J hook, of course. But I like the fact that in this song, those qualities are paired with some really dope lyrical work on this track as well. I like the bar where he's talking about, growing up in the hood, always trying to keep your bread from the sharks. He's always making you want to put the hammer to your head. Hammerhead, shark. Get it? 745 is another really strong track in my opinion. Homage has some really cool interpolations or homages to some Rick Ross material as well as future material. And then with Samo and Bag Back, another couple of really, really hot tracks. I really like that there's the ASAP Rocky feature on Samo, as well as the very screechy keyboard pitches on this instrumental. And with Bag Back, I feel like this is the one song that kind of goes out there a ways and really does come back with something very strong in terms of its execution and its overall sound. So yeah, in my opinion, this is another strong entry into the discography of Vince Staples. I want to see him continue to kind of go out where he's trying to go. We just need a little bit more execution when we're out there so you can bring the fans along with you. Because I really do feel like Vince is the kind of rapper capable of putting together a project at least once in his career that sort of hallmarks or highlights a time in hip-hop. I really do think his talent reaches that far, and, you know, of course I'm looking forward to the next project and seeing him hopefully knock this next one out of the park. So, to describe this album, I would definitely say that this album is Boomin. Vince said it himself, he wanted to quote-unquote serve the bass on this album, and yes, there is quite a lot to go around on this project. And of course, this album is also esoteric in the way that there are those songs that are pretty straightforward, but then a whole other half of the album is very experimental. It's definitely out there a ways. And finally, my last compliment to this record is that I think overall we are looking at something very well coordinated. Whether I like these songs or not, or anyone else, or if you like some and not others, and there's room for differences on those, what I do really like about this album is the fact that everything really does sound cut from the same cloth. I think it shows proof to the level of thought and focus that Vince was able to put into this project. Whether or not I liked the entire final product, I can see that in the end there was an ensemble put together here. Alright, that's all I got for you guys on this new Vince Staples album. As usual, I want to hear what you guys are thinking about this record and what you guys think about what I think on this record. Am I sort of right? Am I sort of wrong? Am I really right? Am I really wrong? And why? Thanks as always for watching. You guys are really great. You guys are really awesome. And remember, without favor, art is like a windmill without wind. Dev Del Molino, out.